Hello and welcome to Vantage. I'm Alison LaGrange. Let's get started. The two-day SCO Summit ended yesterday, but its ripple effects are still being felt across the globe. Yesterday, photos of Prime Minister Modi with President Putin and Xi Jinping went viral, and Donald Trump was quick to respond. The US president called trade with India a one-sided disaster, while his Treasury Secretary went further, labeling the SCO performative. We'll break down Washington's new trade lectures and what they mean for India. Meanwhile, Pakistan's actual power broker, Army Chief Asim Munir, is in China. He joined Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif at the SCO meetings, and he's expected to attend Beijing's upcoming military parade alongside North Korea's Kim Jong-un. In other news, why the European Union is ramping up defense spending. What is the first made-in-India chip that's making headlines? Why are Tesla sales in India far below expectations? A devastating landslide in Sudan has killed at least 1,000 people, and a special report on floods across India. All this and more coming up. But first, the headlines. The Indian Army joins US troops for a military exercise in Alaska. The annual joint military drill will continue until the 14th of September. This is one of the largest joint military exercises between India and the US. The exercise comes at a time when ties between New Delhi and Washington have been strained. The death toll from the powerful earthquake that struck Afghanistan on Sunday climbs to over 1,400. More than 3,000 others have been injured. It is one of the deadliest quakes to have hit the country in decades. The European Union says it is sending emergency supplies to help Afghanistan. Last-ditch talks between the French far-right and the Prime Minister failed to achieve any breakthrough. This increases the chances of the Prime Minister losing next week's confidence vote. If that happens, President Emmanuel Macron could choose a new premier or call for snap elections. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky to meet European leaders in Paris on Thursday. Zelensky wants to discuss security guarantees to prevent Russian attacks if a peace deal with Moscow is reached. Kiev is pressing for a European peacekeeping force, but Moscow has said that it won't tolerate the presence of any Western troops in Ukraine. And junta-run Burkina Faso passes a law banning homosexuality. Those found guilty will now face up to 5 years in jail. Burkina Faso is the latest African nation to pass anti-gay legislation. Homosexuality is illegal in around 30 African countries. Trade wars are usually about balance sheets and tariffs. But with Donald Trump back in the White House, they've started looking a lot more like reality television. One day, he's sparring with China. The next, it's Europe. And lately, India has taken center stage. The SCO Summit wrapped up yesterday. Images of Prime Minister Narendra Modi standing shoulder to shoulder with Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping went viral. Looks like they didn't just trend online. They also caught Trump's attention. Because on Truth Social, the US president went on a rant. And I'll quote from his post. He called trade with India a totally one-sided disaster. He complained that India sells America massive amounts of goods, all while slapping huge tariffs on US exports. Remember, Washington recently slapped a 50% tariff on India. This over New Delhi's continued purchases of Russian oil. And now Trump is using that fight to double down. In his telling, the US is the victim. India is the villain of his trade war storyline, and these steep tariffs are justice. But here are some facts. The India-US trade stands at $130 billion. This equation is stacked in India's favor. Indian exports goods worth $88 billion, but the imports are just $42 billion. So India has a trade surplus of $46 billion. And the US president is right for once. India does run a trade surplus. But so do many other countries, including the likes of China. Yet Trump is handing them tariff exemption extensions. Also, the US president claimed India agreed to reduce the tariffs to zero. Again, there is no confirmation about this. The Indian government hasn't said anything. India's Commerce Minister says New Delhi is still in talks with the US for a trade deal. So no one knows where Trump is getting his facts from. New Delhi is yet to hit back at it, but today Prime Minister Modi did send a message during his speech at the Semicon India event.
एक तरफ जब दुनिया भर की इकोनॉमीज में चिंताएं हैं, आर्थिक स्वार्थ से पैदा हुई चुनौतियां हैं, उस माहौल में भारत ने 7.8% की ग्रोथ हासिल करके दिखाई है.
And amid all of this, Trump's advisors can't stop lecturing India. I'm talking about Peter Navarro. He called Modi's SCO huddle with Xi and Putin troublesome. Navarro said it was a shame.
It was a shame to see Modi getting in bed as the leader of the biggest democracy in the world with the two biggest authoritarian dictators in the world, in Putin and Xi Jinping. That doesn't make any sense. I'm not sure what he's thinking, particularly since India has been in a Cold War and sometimes a hot war with China for decades.
And then there was U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. He attempted the balancing act. Bessent called the SCO Summit performative. However, he maintained that the two great countries, that's India and U.S., would get it solved.
This is a long-standing meeting. It's called the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, and I think it's largely performative. I think at the end of the day, India is the most populous democracy in the world. The values are much closer to ours and to China's than to Russia's. I think at the end of the day, two great countries will get this solved.
But how do you solve things with the sword of more tariffs hanging over your head? Reports suggest Trump is proposing steep tariffs on pharmaceuticals, even as much as 200% tariffs on some drugs. This could be bad news for India. New Delhi makes 40% of America's generic drugs, from insulin to cancer medication, even daily blood pressure pills. India manufactures all of it. The US is the top buyer of Indian generics. In 2024 alone, India exported drugs worth $8.7 billion to the US. Over 90% of US prescriptions are for generics. 4 in 10 come from Indian manufacturers. If tariffs kick in, it won't just squeeze Indian manufacturers. It will explode drug prices in America itself. The cost of essential medicine could skyrocket, and this could be detrimental. Healthcare is already unaffordable for millions in America. The last thing they need is higher drug prices. And so, at the end of the day, Trump's trade war isn't just about injustice and surpluses. He may be pushing to punish India, but who ends up really paying the bill? Because if these tariffs on drugs go through, it won't just be New Delhi that feels the heat. It will be American patients and pharmacies. They will find their prescriptions suddenly out of reach. Trump's trade wars may look like reality television, but when the cameras stop rolling, it's ordinary people who get stuck with the cliffhanger. In summits, countries are represented by the people who actually run them, the leaders who make the calls, who set the foreign policy, who command the trust of other capitals. which is why at this year's SCO Summit in Tianjin, it wasn't Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif in the spotlight. It was the man who really holds the keys to Islamabad, Army Chief Asim Munir. His presence alone was extraordinary. Munir is the first serving Pakistan Army Chief to attend the SCO in this capacity. For decades, these summits have been the domain of civilian leaders. But this time it was the general sitting in strategy huddles, the general whose movements made headlines, and the same general who is expected to attend Beijing's grand military parade. So what did Munir's visit look like? The Pakistan Army Chief landed in China separately from his Prime Minister. Protocol says the two don't travel together. But it also looked like symbolism. Two men, two itineraries, two very different levels of importance. Sharif was posting on X about his historic visit. But it was Munir who was ushered into closed-door meetings with China's top officials. For Beijing, the message was clear. The real leader of Pakistan had arrived. And what exactly was Shehbaz Sharif doing? He did what prime ministers do at summits. He gave a carefully worded speech. He spoke about Pakistan's losses to terrorism. He talked about regional peace. It's like the irony almost writes itself. Pakistan exports cross-border terrorism, yet Shehbaz Sharif is speaking about counter-terrorism. But outside the podium, his role was diminished. In bilateral meetings with Iran and Azerbaijan, he wasn't alone. Munir sat right there beside him, the unmistakable shadow in the room. If there was a moment that captured the dynamic, it was Sharif sitting silently while Munir leaned in during private sessions. The elected leader looked almost like the +1. After all, summits are full of body language, and in Tianjin, the body language said it all. Shehbaz Sharif was present, but Asim Munir was relevant. Now, what makes this trip even more striking is that Munir had been to China just last month. He had met with Vice President Han Zheng, the Foreign Minister Wang Yi, and top generals of China's People's Liberation Army. The discussions then focused on counter-terrorism and the security for Chinese projects in Pakistan. Barely weeks later, he was back. For any other official, that would look excessive. But for Pakistan's army chief, it looked routine. And what Munir is doing in China isn't just about military ties. It's about positioning himself as Pakistan's face abroad. He claimed victory in the recent India-Pakistan conflict, where Islamabad sued for peace. He was promoted to Field Marshal for losing a war. He met with Donald Trump in Washington. Trump had hosted the Pakistani army chief back in the month of June. It was the first time a U.S. president had hosted the head of Pakistan's army. And now, Munir is cementing ties with Beijing. For outsiders, this may look like a balancing act. For Pakistan, it looks like reality. The general is the one carrying out diplomacy while the civilian government trails behind. And for the world watching, it's a reminder that summits aren't always about who speaks on stage. Sometimes it's about who is listened to behind closed doors. In Tianjin, as in Islamabad, the general has the floor. After all, in Pakistan, prime ministers may come and go, but the general is always constant. As geopolitical tensions simmer, Europe is worried. Given the Trump administration's chaos, the war in Ukraine, the European Union has been on edge for a while now, and their defense spending shows it. It has skyrocketed. The European Defense Agency has released a new report. It says that last year the EU collectively spent $402 billion on defense. This year, it is expected to spend $446 billion. This will be a record high. So what's behind this bigger, bolder defense budget? And will it work? Here's a report.
continent on edge, a war raging at its doorstep, and a future clouded by uncertainty. From the chaos of the Trump administration to the unrelenting war in Ukraine, Europe is facing its gravest security crisis since the Second World War. Old alliances are being tested, new threats are emerging, and the European Union is responding the only way it knows how, by preparing for the worst. EU member states are ramping up their defenses. They are boosting military capabilities, building bunkers, and buying more weapons. The European Union consists of 27 members. Last year, they spent $402 billion on defense. It was a 19% increase compared to the previous year. It was 1.5 times more than China's expenditure, and 3 times more than that of Russia. Only the United States spent more on defense than the EU. And this year is expected to see an even bigger expenditure. EU member states are projected to spend around $446 billion on defense. This will be a record high. But what is this skyrocketing budget devoted towards? It is more than just money spent on salaries of military personnel or the upkeep of facilities. The budget is mostly diverted towards the purchase of new equipment and increased funding towards research and development. The purchase of equipment has seen a 39% higher investment last year as compared to 2023, and for R&D it's about 20%. Out of the 27 EU member states, 25 members saw an increase in defense spending and expansion of their militaries. 16 of these 25 members spent 10% more on defense last year compared to the previous year. Some of the members who have spent the highest are Eastern European nations, like Poland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Given the war in Ukraine, they spent about 3 to 4% of their GDP on defense. But apart from the Russia-Ukraine conflict, there are 2 other reasons. The first is the President of the United States. Donald Trump was supposed to be Europe's closest ally, but he has gone back and forth on his support for Russia. He has threatened to pull out of NATO, saying that American protection comes at a price. He has called the Europeans freeloaders. After all, 4 years now, European nations have depended on the US for their weapons. But the geopolitical landscape has shifted, and the EU is trying to become more self-reliant. But while governments across Europe are splurging on defense, they are also struggling financially, and this is the second big factor. The German economy is not in the best shape. France and Italy have enormous public debts. European governments hope that increasing military spending will also boost their lackluster economies. But while there is more money for tanks and missiles, there is less of it for education and pensions. Economists estimate that every dollar of military spending will increase gross domestic product by 50 cents. But by comparison, the returns on spending on education or infrastructure is usually much higher. So as Europe pours billions into tanks, missiles, and R&D, by increasing taxes, borrowing money, or making cuts in education, it hopes to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, a boost to both its defenses and its GDP. But it is a gamble. Defense spending may bring short-term economic stimulation and a sense of security. But cutting back on social welfare could hurt the EU in the long run. After all, true security doesn't come from weapons alone.
Our next story is about semiconductors, better known as chips. It's the new oil. Chips run your life. They power all your gadgets. And as the world becomes more digital, chips have become central to our existence, which means they're central to economies. So countries want to secure supplies and to boost production. Governments are investing billions. They are trying to win what's become the global chip race, and India is nowhere behind. Today, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated Semicon India 2025. And for the first time, India wasn't just talking about chips, it was holding one in its hands.
जिनमें है विक्रम 32 बिट प्रोसेसर। ये चिप इसरो और सेमीकंडक्टर लैब ने तैयार किया है। साथ में है 4 अप्रूव्ड प्रोजेक्ट्स की टेस्ट चिप्स और 28 चिप्स जिन्हें छात्रों ने चिप्स टू स्टार्टअप प्रोग्राम के तहत तैयार किया है। इनका फैब्रिकेशन और पैकेजिंग मोहाली के सेमीकंडक्टर हब में तैयार किया गया है।
That was the Vikram 32-bit processor, the first fully made in India microprocessor. It was developed by Indian Space Agency ISRO's Semiconductor Laboratory, ready to endure the punishing conditions of spaceflight.
सेमीकंडक्टर की दुनिया में एक बात कही जाती है, oil was black gold, but chips are digital diamonds. हमारी पिछली शताब्दी को ऑयल ने शेप किया। दुनिया का भाग्य तेल के कुओं से तय होता था, लेकिन 21वीं शताब्दी की शक्ति छोटी सी चिप में सिमट करके रह गई है। ये चिप भले छोटी सी है, लेकिन इसमें दुनिया की प्रगति को बड़ी गति देने की ताकत है।
It's small, yes, but as the Indian Prime Minister said, chips are the digital diamonds of the 21st century, and India wants a few of those diamonds for itself. Just 3.5 years ago, India was primarily a consumer of advanced semiconductors. Today, it's stepping onto the global stage as a creator. The Vikram chip is proof that the nation's semiconductor journey is no longer theoretical. It's real, tangible, and space-ready. Currently, the global semiconductor market is projected to top $1 trillion soon. India sees itself as a player, not a bystander. The country's semiconductor mission was launched in 2021. It has already attracted $18 billion in investments. 10 major projects have been cleared, and these numbers may sound big, but in the chip world, building a robust ecosystem requires billions, patience, and talent. India has the ambition, now it's about execution, and that makes this Vikram chip special. Beyond its space-grade credentials, this 32-bit processor can handle complex calculations, large memory loads, and extreme environments. So it's not just a proof of concept. It's a versatile chip with potential applications in defense, aerospace, automotive, and energy sectors. And this is a subtle but crucial point in Prime Minister Modi's vision. India isn't just assembling chips. It wants to own the IP, or the intellectual property. That means designing chips, innovating new architectures, and creating products that other countries can't easily replicate. The government is pushing for design-linked incentives and talent training. It aims to train 85,000 semiconductor professionals by the year 2030. So, Semicon India 2025 wasn't just a tech showcase. It was a call to action. Because, let's be honest, building a chip industry is not easy. It takes billions of dollars in investments, it takes specialized labor, and decades of consistent effort. The global semiconductor market is concentrated and competitive, but India has momentum. It has a growing talent pool, stable policies, and now its first indigenous chip. If ambition and patience meet execution, India could move from a chip consumer to a global semiconductor hub. So, the chip in Prime Minister Modi's hand is more than just a microprocessor. It is the symbol of India's ambition, resilience, and the future in global tech race. Tiny but mighty, and just the beginning. For our next story tonight, let's talk about gold. The price of gold has hit a record high. It was trading at more than $3,500 per ounce early today. After all, there is global economic uncertainty, so the demand for this precious metal has increased. It has fueled the upward trend, which has seen gold prices rise by nearly a third this year. But is there more to the story? Our next report tells you more.
The price of gold has hit a fresh record high. It rose above $3,500 an ounce in Asia, surpassing its April peak. The price has nearly doubled in value since early 2023. And this year, it has risen by nearly a third. What's behind this upward trend? Simply put, global economic uncertainty. This precious metal is viewed as a safer asset for investment. People see it as a hedge against inflation and macroeconomic upheaval. So during times of uncertainty, investors buy more gold. We saw this earlier this year, after US President Donald Trump announced wide-ranging tariffs. But the latest rally is because of two key reasons. First, the US dollar has weakened. So some central banks are ditching US government bonds, also known as US Treasuries, and adding to their gold holdings. The share of US Treasuries held by foreign central banks has been declining for more than a decade now. But last year, the shift accelerated. The metal overtook the euro to become the world's second most common central bank reserve asset after the dollar, accounting for 20% of global official reserves. This has continued into 2025. Several central banks, including in India, China, Turkey, and Poland, have been rapidly boosting their gold reserves. The second big reason is the expectation of a US interest rate cut. People think that is going to happen very soon. Markets see a 90% probability of a quarter-point reduction. And this has made gold an even more attractive prospect. This comes amid a growing alarm over the US central bank's independence. Trump has repeatedly put pressure on the chair of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, and criticized him for not lowering interest rates. He recently took aim at Powell over a costly renovation of the central bank's Washington headquarters.
So we're taking a look, and it looks like it's about $3.1 billion. It went up a little bit, or a lot. So the 2.7 is now 3.1.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, it just came out.
Yeah, I haven't heard that from anybody at the Fed.
Yeah, it just came out.
Our notes had it about 3.1 as well.
3.1,
3.2.
This came from us?
Yes. I don't know who does that.
You're including the Martin renovation. You just added
our entire capital.
Yeah, you just added in a third building is what that is. That's a third building,
Well,
including
no,
the
but
Martin building.
it's a building that's being built.
No, it was built 5 years ago. We finished Martin 5 years ago.
It's part of the overall work.
But it's
So,
not new.
So we're going to take a look. We're going to see what's happening, and it's got a long way. Do you expect any more additional cost overruns?
Don't expect them. We're ready for them.
The US president has also moved to sack Fed Governor Lisa Cook over allegations of mortgage fraud. This week, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent defended Trump's moves and said that the Fed is and should be independent, but added that it had made a lot of mistakes. So if the Fed cuts interest rates because of political pressure, investors worry that inflation could rise. And this has added to their increased interest in gold. So while Donald Trump fuels economic uncertainty through the trade war, he could potentially be also boosting a de-dollarization trend, at least among some central banks, and by proxy, helping gold reach new heights.
After the SCO Summit in Tianjin, the action is shifting to Beijing. China is all set to host its military parade in the historic Tiananmen Square, a grand display of power and military might. Carefully choreographed by President Xi Jinping, the parade commemorates the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. It marks 80 years of Japan's surrender in the war and China's victory against an occupying force. But it is so much more than that for President Xi. Arrangements have been made for about 50,000 guests, and rows of seats have been reserved for 26 foreign heads of state, including the leaders of Iran, Malaysia, Myanmar, Mongolia, Indonesia, and Zimbabwe. The guest list also includes leaders from Serbia and Slovakia. The only Western leaders attending the parade, and this in a major diplomatic win for President Xi. Russian President Vladimir Putin will be attending the massive parade. And so will the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Safe to say, this is a big deal. Kim Jong-un is a surprise addition. His attendance was only announced late last week. Plus, he rarely travels abroad. His recent contact with the world leaders has been limited to Putin. Since the war in Ukraine broke out, the two leaders have met twice. And since coming to power in 2011, Kim has met Xi 5 times. He last visited Beijing in 2019 for an event marking the 70th anniversary of diplomatic ties between the two countries. So tomorrow's parade will be Kim's first multilateral international meeting ever. It will also be the first time a North Korean leader has attended a Chinese military parade since 1959. And the first time that all 3 leaders, Kim Jong-un, Xi Jinping, and Vladimir Putin, will gather at the same venue. What only adds to this spectacle is how the Hermit Kingdom's leader has arrived in Beijing this afternoon, in his armored train. The old-fashioned train that has become a symbol of the secluded nation and has long invited global intrigue. Like I said, this is an armored train. It has heavy protection and tight security, so it travels slowly, at an average speed of 60 kilometers an hour. The trip from North Korea to Beijing is expected to have taken about 24 hours. Pyongyang has released some pictures from the trip. You can see Kim smiling on board, sitting at a wooden table with the North Korean flag behind him, accompanied by senior officials, including the minister Cho Son-hui. But there is so much more than just tight security on this train. According to reports, around 90 carriages, including conference rooms, audience chambers, bedrooms, satellite phone connections, and flat-screen televisions. There is reportedly a restaurant too, which serves fine French wines and dishes like fresh lobster. Though he also travels by plane and private jet, Kim Jong-un has used this train for several trips abroad. He rode the train during his last international visit, a trip to Russia to meet with his counterpart Vladimir Putin in 2023. But Kim Jong-un is not the only one. Now, this train has carried generations of the Kim family. The tradition of traveling via train was started by Kim's grandfather, Kim Il-sung, Kim's father, Kim Jong-il, and also traveled by train, and apparently mostly because he was afraid of flying. Now, both the leaders host lavish dinners on the train, and reports claim that the train carried cases of Bordeaux and Beaujolais wine from Paris. But ever since international sanctions started crushing Pyongyang in 2003, very little information about North Korea, including its train, has reached the outside world. But this has only heightened the intrigue around it. So once again, as the armored train reaches Beijing, it doesn't just carry a leader, but a message. After all, Xi Jinping's meticulously orchestrated military parade isn't just commemorating the past, it's projecting a vision of the future, with Xi, Putin, and Kim sharing a stage and sending a signal that in geopolitics, symbols matter, even if it is the quiet clatter of an old armored train arriving in Beijing. The spectacle is deliberate, and the world is watching.
Located on the outskirts of the capital Delhi, one of India's wealthiest suburbs, home of the futuristic skyscrapers, 190 crore rupee penthouses, and sprawling corporate houses. But this is Gurgaon when it rains. Another rainy day, same story. Yesterday, the monsoon brought heavy rainfall, and once again Gurgaon was brought to a standstill. The rain triggered a traffic gridlock. Thousands of commuters were stuck on the roads for up to 8 hours. Yes, a nightmarish 8 hours, stretching over more than 10 kilometers, with a seemingly never-ending row of cars spread across several lanes on a key highway. As Gurgaon drowns, the usual coping mechanisms have emerged. Most schools, colleges and offices are working from home. Many citizens are outraged. Some are amused, sharing memes and talking about how it is better to sleep in the office than to commute in the rain. But Gurgaon is not an isolated case. This year, torrential monsoon rains have wreaked havoc in several parts of India. Rains have battered northern states like Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Punjab and parts of Jammu and Kashmir. Hundreds of people have died in floods and landslides. Entire villages have been swept away. Now, weather warnings have been issued in Delhi and the surrounding cities. The Yamuna River passes through the city. It has crossed the danger mark. Low-lying areas have been flooded. Around 5,000 people live directly on the Yamuna floodplain. And nearly 15,000 residents live in low-lying zones, most vulnerable to rising waters. Many of them say that floodwaters entered their homes, but they weren't the only ones affected in the capital. Heavy rains on Monday brought Delhi to a grinding halt. Waterlogging, massive bumper-to-bumper traffic snarls, and technical snags in the metro network. Air travel was equally chaotic. Over 95 incoming flights and more than 350 departures were delayed on Monday. And today has not been very different. Rainfall has continued, and as the monsoon rages, it is expected to persist. And with it, so are the problems. But why does this happen year after year? It is a long list of problems: poor drainage systems, encroachment on wetlands, poorly planned rapid urbanization, and irregular maintenance of drains, among other issues. But the story remains the same. Every year the monsoon arrives, and be it the national capital or the Millennium City, every year our cities are caught off guard. As the rains continue to pour, cities continue to gasp for breath. Millions of people stuck in cars, wading through flooded streets or worse, losing their homes and loved ones to the floods. And yet, year after year, nothing changes. The promises remain unfulfilled, but this is not just about inconvenience. It is also about a looming question. How are cities meant to be future ready when they fall apart with every rainstorm? When will things change? Urban resilience is not built on shortcuts and band-aid solutions. It needs vision, planning, and most of all, urgency. Tesla's much-hyped entry into India has been more fumble than flair so far. The The company opened bookings in mid-July, but since then the EV giant has managed only about 600 orders. This is how many vehicles it sells globally in just 4 hours. Now, the company plans to ship between 350 and 500 cars this year. Limited to the cities of Mumbai, Delhi, Pune and Gurgaon, Tesla's lackluster bookings highlight the challenge of breaking into India's price-sensitive market. So, can its global brand power attract India's cautious consumers? Our next report tells you.
When Tesla finally rolled into India this summer, the buzz was electric. But as the first numbers trickled in, the excitement quickly ran into a hard reality check. Since mid-July, Tesla has received orders for just over 600 vehicles in India. To put that into perspective, Tesla sells roughly the same number globally every 4 hours. The company had initially aimed to sell 2,500 cars this year. Instead, it now plans to ship a maximum of 500 and only to 4 cities: Mumbai, Delhi, Pune, and Gurugram. So what's holding Tesla back in a country that seems so ripe for electric mobility? First is obviously the price tag. Tesla's entry-level Model Y starts north of 6 million rupees. That's $68,000. In India, where most EV buyers spend around 2.2 million rupees, this puts Tesla in a rarefied luxury bracket. The company had hoped that its iconic brand name, along with Musk's celebrity CEO status, would make buyers overlook the sticker shock. Instead, it turns out that even Elon Musk can't escape the gravitational pull of a price-sensitive market. High local import tariffs make it almost impossible for Tesla to offer a competitively priced car. India taxes imported EVs up to 110%, and negotiations to bring that down via trade deals or special agreements have so far stalled. Tesla's global strategy has largely relied on an aura of exclusivity and word-of-mouth marketing. In the US or Europe, this works. People see a Tesla and they want one. In India, automakers typically flood the market with advertising, offering test drives, incentives, and promotions. Tesla's minimalist approach has drawn crowds, but failed to convert them into sales at scale. Tesla also counted on regulatory relief. A lowering of import tariffs over time, or a potential free trade agreement with Europe that would allow cheaper shipments from Germany. Neither materialized. Meanwhile, US-India tensions over trade have only made the tariff environment stickier. Adding to the challenge, Indian authorities are contemplating steep consumer levies on luxury EVs priced above $46,000. If implemented, this would push Tesla and other high-end brands further out of reach of potential buyers. Also, India's EV market itself is still very nascent. In the first half of 2025, just over 2,800 electric cars in that price range were sold. Tesla's 600 bookings represent a respectable fraction of this niche. But the math isn't promising if the goal is mass market penetration. The infrastructure is another hurdle. While major cities have some charging points, long-distance EV adoption is still constrained. So what can Tesla do? Lower prices seem unlikely in the short term, given import tariffs. Local manufacturing might eventually offer a solution, but setting up a plant in India is a multi-year endeavor. Aggressive marketing, partnerships with local companies, or incentives could help. But it would mean departing from the Musk playbook that has served Tesla so well elsewhere. For now, Tesla's Indian venture looks like a slow start in a market where speed, pricing, and policy all matter. The brand's global halo can turn heads. But in India, it seems the price tag speaks louder than the fame of a charismatic CEO.
Tragedy has struck in Sudan's Darfur region, where a massive landslide wiped out the entire village of Tariff. Local reports say around 1,000 people have died. Only one person survived this. The disaster came after days of heavy rains in the Murrah Mountains, leaving the village completely flattened. Rescue efforts are now extremely difficult, not just because of the scale of the landslide, but also because Sudan is in the middle of a brutal civil war. Our next report brings you the details.
The Mara Mountains, a volcanic range stretching over 160 kilometers southwest of El Fasher, are beautiful, fertile, and notoriously rugged. But this time, relentless rains transformed that beauty into devastation. Heavy rainfall over consecutive days triggered the collapse of the mountainside. Trees were uprooted, homes crushed under thick mud, and the village disappeared almost instantly. Residents of Tarasin had little warning. The rains, which peak in August, were unusually heavy this year. By the time the landslide roared through, there was nothing left to do but cling to whatever they could, or, in most cases, perish under the debris. Over 1,000 people lost their lives. Amid the devastation, a single survivor emerged. The Sudan Liberation Movement Army described the loss as complete, with all other residents presumed dead. International aid agencies have been called upon to help recover bodies, though the region's inaccessibility makes such efforts extremely difficult. The Mara Mountains are not only steep and prone to landslides, they are also isolated. No roads lead reliably to Tarasin. Heavy rains often wash out paths entirely. Aid organizations face enormous logistical hurdles just to reach affected areas, and the ongoing war has only made matters worse. Ironically, many who had fled fighting in Darfur sought refuge in these mountains. Tarasin and other settlements in the Mara Range had become crowded. Displaced families escaped clashes between Sudanese military forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces and hid here. What was supposed to be a sanctuary became a death trap. The Sudan Civil War, now in its third year, has made humanitarian crises the norm rather than the exception. Fighting between the Sudanese army and RSF has killed tens of thousands, displaced millions, and left entire regions inaccessible to aid. El Fasher, the capital of North Darfur, has been under siege for over a year. In this context, the landslide is more than a natural disaster. It is an additional blow to a population already on the brink. Roads damaged by rain or conflict, coupled with the lack of specialized rescue teams, mean that the dead may never be properly recovered. The Sudan Liberation Movement Army has pledged to assist the Sudanese army, but they too are stretched thin. Retrieving bodies, providing medical care, and delivering aid in the Mara Mountains will require a lot. International support, specialized teams, and time, all of which are in short supply. The landslide comes atop an already dire humanitarian crisis. Parts of Darfur are experiencing famine due to the ongoing conflict. Approximately 10 million people are displaced within the Sudan, with another 4 million seeking refuge abroad. The Sudan may have endured decades of war, famine, and political upheaval. But disasters like this show that sometimes nature itself can be the deadliest actor on the stage.
And now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. Vietnam celebrates its Independence Day with a huge military parade. Humanoid robots display athletic skills at the birthplace of the Olympics. A dazzling red aurora is seen from space. And finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 1945, Japan formally surrendered, bringing an end to the Second World War. We are leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow.
And I can control it with these two buttons, so I can shake hands with it. We can do different grips with it, so you can make a pinch with it. If you're at a rock concert, you know, you can rock on right over there.
Firstpost now available in 9 languages on YouTube. English,
$36 trillion.
French,
Le FMI, comme
German,
Geschäftsführenden Direktor,
Hindi,
$30 trillion kakarjo.
Indonesian,
Pemerintah tanpa pemeriksaan.
Italian,
Sekali radikali.
Japanese,
4 兆ドル以上も
Portuguese,
por causa do próprio balanço patrimonial.
Spanish.
Beautiful bill.
Go to Settings, click on Audio Track and select the language of your choice. Be the first to know what's happening around you in your first language. Firstpost.